Forget supercivilizations and megasites, forget the megaliths and the great temples. It's often the small stuff that tells us what really went on in the past and shaped the arc of the human story. Little bits of flint, for example. Little bits of flint are probably the most telling pieces of evidence as to what human beings have been up to throughout all of prehistory. But today we're looking at particular little bits of flint that focus our attention on what is probably one of the most profound revolutions in all of human existence. I'm Michael Bott.
And I'm Rupert Susskind.
We're the prehistory guys with more news of old stuff. Old stuff. And it doesn't come much better old stuff than this old stuff. Tell us, Rupert, about the study that's kicked off our thoughts on this. We do have thoughts on this.
We do have thoughts. We do have thoughts, yes. It's really exciting, actually. It's a multinational team of researchers and archaeologists have come up with evidence for threshing sledges in Greece 8,000 years ago or so. Why is this important? Well, it's important because this is at the time when farming was really kicking off in Greece and beginning to move west. And what is a threshing sledge, apart from anything else? I've got to be honest, I'd never heard of one before this paper. But the fact that people in the early stages of farming had got it together that the need for large-scale threshing, so basically separating grain from stem of crops, that they have found an actual tool, a machine, and they're using animals to do this. Animals as traction. It's a thing that we've talked about in the past. We'll talk about it again today. But it's a significant discovery that they've made over there.
I mean, don't get us wrong. I mean, we often give the impression that we know quite a lot, and that we've got some of the fundamentals nailed down. That enables us to, talk over the top of it, to bring context for stuff. But I have to say, I think this one knocked us for six, because we're thinking, how can we talk about the movement of farming from Mesopotamia and out of Anatolia and the Levant and across the Aegean to Greece and beyond without knowing of this particular bit of machinery, call it that, which would have made which must have been fundamental to the ability to reap the harvest. The ability to create surplus and to feed people in such a way that populations begin to expand. It's quite something. So we'll probably park that the profound bit of the conversation maybe till a little bit later. So hang around for that. But in the meantime, there's some nitty-gritty about this research. I mean, where does it start from, the research? Where do you get the impression, that what kicked this bit of research off? What were they looking for, do we think?
Well, when you start looking at micro blades, so early sickles, for example, we do know that flint was used widely. Make flint blades and glue them into whatever sort of handle you want to be using. Different shapes were available, and so when you're looking at different types of blade and their different uses, I think what flagged things up for people was the rare occasions when they would find a variety of blades, some of which were not sharp at all, some of which they had a different purpose. And it was the knowledge of threshing sledges. I don't know why I find that so difficult to say. Threshing sledges. That we've known about these. They were still using them up until... In fact, there are probably some places in the world where they still do. But they were being used up until very recently, just because of modern machinery, that it's more, it's quicker and more efficient to use the modern machinery. But they were still using threshing sledges very, very recently. We're talking decades ago. So our knowledge and understanding of threshing sledges is extreme. So being able to recognize that some of these little blades were clearly not cutting blades, it looked as if they had come from this sort of usage. So that was the game changer, really, to push back this use of machinery. I'm going to call it machinery, to that far back in Greece. I think that was what kicked it off, isn't it? Am I right? I think I'm right.
Yes, I think so. And the other thing is that what seem to be very, very fine points. That's a bit of a pun on what we're talking about, but what as archaeological fine points is the distinguishing factor between how you that you can distinguish what a piece of stone has been used for by looking at the wear signature on the blade or wherever it is on the stone, and being able to distinguish the wear characteristics of a piece of stone attached to a threshing sledge on the bottom is distinguishable from a piece of flint that's been attached to a sickle for cutting. Before we go any further, I think we should probably describe a threshing sledge so that there's a kind of visual thing. Obviously. I'll put a picture up. But maybe some kind of description I think is appropriate as well.
I think the easiest description is imagine a flat board, and on the underside of the flat board, you have embedded lots and lots and lots of stone blades. So that, and they're not sharp necessarily. They don't need to be sharp. All they need is to be able to crush the grass, the crop.
Agitate
when
the
you're,
grass.
agitate it. That's a good word. When you're dragging it across, so they would have been pulled by cattle. I suppose they could have been pulled by very strong people, but no, pulled by cattle. And
I think in some cases they were pulled by people. It's just a question of what you got available. Asses, donkeys, whatever. Yeah,
indeed. Yes, in fact, any beast of burden, you've got to feel sorry for them. But it's just dragging the board with all those little blades across the top of the grasses, and that would separate out the grass seeds. It would separate all the grain in theory. Yeah, is that a good enough description?
Yeah, and then make it available for winnowing, separating out. On a good windy day.
Yes,
separating out the seeds from the chaff. Yeah,
indeed,
the wheat from the chaff. It's such a familiar phrase, the wheat from the chaff. I mean, I suppose it's biblical, isn't it? That's where it gets embedded. And yet such a phrase is such embedded in our minds, and yet we've forgotten how fundamental it is to our existence. Certainly is the way we are today with our... we rather take for granted the process of the creation of bread and other side products.
Yes.
So I think that the other aspect of this is that previously it had been assumed that the threshing sled or the use of it was a later development in Europe, 2,000 years later than this discovery or than this research proves. So I think the surprise in all of this, or one of the surprises, I should put it that way, is that this way of doing things lands or is apparent in Greece, in Thessaly, at this time, so shortly after. It is known that the Neolithic package, the first farmers, in other words, arrived in Greece, from across the Aegean. I mean, the first record that there is of Neolithic settlement in the Aegean is on Crete. I think 6,800, 6,900 BCE. And here we are on the mainland. And, you know, the fact that this has been worked out from several different sites gives you the impression, oh, this isn't a one-off. This is already common practice on the mainland. So few years after we know the first settlements arrived in the Aegean, which tends to tell us that the threshing sledge would have been part of the whole Neolithic package coming over from Anatolia and the Levant.
Do you know, it raised a really big question for me in that a little while ago when we were talking about early farming, and a team of researchers had done a lot of number crunching and had come up with a statistic that that one man, if he worked hard for 3 weeks at harvesting time, if one man worked hard for 3 weeks, he could gather enough grain to feed his family for a year. A family of 4 was how it was calculated. And this made me think, whoa, hold on. This makes the gathering of grain quite a lot more efficient. So if threshing sledges were a thing back then, just how much grain could you have gathered as a group of people at harvesting time? You know, that suddenly the possibilities for feeding a lot of people, they change significantly, don't they?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, in brief, I mean, quoting, I think, from the paper itself, it says the findings shed light on the diffusion and evolution of Neolithic farming systems from the nearest east to Europe, suggesting a complex interplay of technological transfer, adaptation to new environments and socio-economic factors in agricultural development. There, you sort of should have just read that off at the beginning, and when we would have been sorted. What we are bypassing, though, for the moment, are the technical aspects of this paper and of this research, because they're quite deep, quite technical, and I'll show you some pictures of blades, and it just boggles the mind, the ability using these techniques to be able to discern use wear one sort for another. At these times, it says, by integrating traditional use wear analysis with quantitative methods, the study provides a more precise understanding of the wear patterns associated with threshing sledges.
Yes. It has to be said that you have to take your hats off to the people who were doing this research, because when you look at the detail in the paper, what they have analysed on macroscopic and microscopic level, how they've analysed the blades and how they could tell the difference between a blade that had been used for cutting, for example, that's quite obvious, but then the blades underneath it had always been in contact with essentially the ground and just being dragged along. And the different wear patterns to discern those differences on very small blades a lot of the time. It's impressive work, it's got to be said.
Hats off and kudos to Niccolò Mazzucco, who's the guy in charge, the lead author on this. I'll put up a sidebar. It'll tell you a little bit more about him. So hats off to him. So what else can we say about this? There is so much. We could do we could do several programs on this, and I think it'll probably underline when we go back to looking at Mesopotamia. We talk about Göbekli Tepe to Stonehenge. If we're talking about the development of agriculture in the first place, very early, with 8,000 BCE, pre-pottery Neolithic B, the time scale we're looking at. For us, it really focuses on that transition point. When do people start transitioning from using wild cereals to domestic cereals. What happened? Who was it invented? The threshing sledge. Hats off to him.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
What have you?
And also another point that's worth bearing in mind is that it's only in the last few years, I think 2018, Jane Gastra from UCL and her team, they showed that ankle bones in cattle had been used for traction in Eastern Europe. So Bulgaria, Romania, places like that. And there was a big question of, well, what was the traction? Because, okay, that the animals were being used for dragging things, but was it timbers? Was it this? Was it that? And now you have a very solid reason for what the animals may have been used for. And that's quite significant, I think.
One thing I did want to mention before we finish or start wrapping up is that what's remarkable is that there's a small sample size to this. There's a small sample size to the whole study, and that in relationship to the number of sickle blades that have been found, the number of stones that relate to the threshing sledge is pretty tiny by comparison. So they're working on a small sample size, and it sort of just brings to my mind, well, maybe that's why not a lot of fuss has been made about the threshing sledge as a thing, because the evidence is actually fairly slim. I think it's the evidence is good enough to be able to state the existence of threshing sledges way back into the pre-pottery Neolithic. But we don't know enough about them to be able to state that categorically. It's one of those areas where you've got to take where you've got to respect the problems of archaeology in the field. The sorts of stones that we're looking at here, whether it be flint or the other stones used on the bottom of a threshing sledge, is that they're completely unremarkable.
Yes. Yeah.
With a sickle blade, you've got half a chance in the field of having your eye in and recognizing it as a bit of worked flint.
Mm.
With a threshing sledge stone, easy to toss aside, I would have thought. And especially as the finding them seems to be relatively random. I'll tell you what, I would have thought, if they were going to find a threshing sledge, it would come in a sort of, there would be a bundle of flints and stones of this sort all in one place if one had been left somewhere. But the thing is, with the threshing sledge, it's less likely to have been taken back to the settlement that they related to. So they're probably still out there in the wilderness or on the threshing,
just left in the field,
wherever the threshing floor was, away from the settlement. Yeah. A sickle blade would have been found in settlement contexts because they're taken home. They'd be more personal objects with need for attendance and sharpening on a almost daily basis. Well, during the harvesting time, anyway. Yeah.
It's a good point. And there's another point that I think is interesting, actually, and that's because this is integral to. They call it the secondary product revolution. This is when people. We'd got past just killing animals to eat them. We had started using them for their secondary products. Now, whether that was milk or wool or traction, the thing is that there was a reason for keeping animals for different purposes. And the side effects, I don't mean side effects. What do I mean? Secondary products. Byproducts. Thank you. That's the word. The byproduct side effects. The byproduct, one of the byproducts from this is that we're talking about a time when people were making wattle and daub houses. And so if you've got all your grain together, you've got all your hay together for threshing, that when you've extracted all the grain, what you're left with is straw, which is, there you are, you've got building material. You mix that with, so the fact that you've got, in this one thing of extracting your food from a situation, you've now got building materials as well. Okay, food for the animals at the same time. But that it's an interesting aspect of that it would make the creation of building material more efficient as well.
Well, yes. I mean, it's a phase shift in the whole sort of agricultural economic condition, I suppose, when you've suddenly shifted from where you're making a bare living out of stuff to something where you're actually producing byproducts as well. The ability to settle and focus your lives or build a settlement, a community around this activity becomes much more a real prospect. Yay. So, threshing sledges, who knew? We didn't. Maybe we were the last. I don't know. Well, and yet, I mean, like I said about sorting the wheat from the chaff and the mention of the threshing floor, it's quite a biblical thing. If you do a search on YouTube for threshing sledges or threshing floor or that, you're likely to come up with a something from a biblically themed YouTube channel as anything else. In fact, I haven't found anything else. It all seemed to be religious based, and yeah. So maybe we're breaking the mold here, Rupert. Maybe we should mention threshing sledges a lot more.
Well, I think we should. I think
we probably will.
Once I get used to saying it a little bit more clearly, yes.
Yeah. I mean, another byproduct of the threshing sledge and the concept of the threshing floor is they've got to be circular. How often, how much do circles come up in?
Honestly, you're opening a can of worms there. Opening a can of worms.
Yeah. So what possibilities lie there? I don't know. And how would we go about relating the two? That's a subject for another day, perhaps. So until that other day, I think it's time to sign off. If you've enjoyed this, please do give us the thumbs up, like and subscribe, in other words. We've got a Patreon page, which we have got a beautiful and lovely community of people who keep us on the... keep our act in, help keep our act in order.
Other metaphors are available.
Yes, wonderfully supportive. So it'd be great to see you there. And of course, the whole GÖBEKLI TEPE to Stonehenge project, which we've embarked upon, needs your support. Links in the description below. Any way you can find to support us would be most welcome. And with that, it's time to say bye-bye from me.
And a bye-bye from me, and we'll see you again soon. See you, folks.
Cheers, folks. All right. Threshing sledges, who knew? Damn. Where will it take us?
Dear.